church just to come to find out that we have taken this bad boy over. When you walk through the door, you're probably greeted by some of our amazing high school students. Walk past the Next Steps area, saw some of our junior high boys, which is kind of scary, but also awesome at the same time. And we definitely don't want to forget those beautiful, amazing students that we have from Compass Kids. And Erica Cox is doing a phenomenal job out there in that ministry. So from Compass Kids and Compass students, I just wanted to say welcome, and we're super stoked to have y'all here today. And I love the awesome journey that we've been on in our Compass student ministries. God is doing something amazing. He is pioneering change in this community and these schools through these fantastic students that we as volunteers get to see week in and week out. And for those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Lamarcus Strickland, and I am the stylish youth pastor here. Yes. For here at Compass Christian Church of North Fort Worth. And I love that I work for a church. Literally, like, y'all, I'm not up here in a suit. I think it's fantastic that this church is a church that literally lives by the motto, come as you are, and we navigate people to God from them. So before we get into this amazing discussion, I wanted to give you just a little bit of insight about who I am and my family. So I am married to the most beautiful woman in the world, in my opinion. Her name is Brittany Strickland, and she is my rock, and she is my backbone, and literally, I didn't do anything. God blessed me out of my coverage. I'll just say that. We have three amazing students. Our firstborn, her name is Carson. She's 6 years old. You probably saw her up here. She's got the blue hair. That's a battle I lost, so I just let that go. And she's a phenomenal dancer. Literally, like last year at the age of 5, they invited her to this dance camp, which I know nothing about dance, but it was for the top dancers actually in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She was one of them. Our second child, her name is Parker. She's right over here. And she's 3 years old. And Parker has actually been blessed with cerebral palsy, CP. And I say blessed because literally, every morning she wakes up, I get to see God's grace in her. Every time she overcomes an obstacle like eating or drinking or seeing or talking, I get to see God's grace in that. And that's a blessing in itself. And lastly, my little mini-me, his name is Titan Knox. And he's 2 years old. And this boy is too much for me already. Literally climbing on things. I told him the other day, like we were in the car, and he was like, Daddy, where are we going? Because he copies everything Carson does. And I said, we're going to see Dumbo at the circus that doesn't exist. He was like, okay, cool, yeah. Like he actually knew what that was. But you don't have to listen very long. And whether it's on the news, social media, passing by in friendly and not so friendly conversations, everybody's talking, is talking about generational differences. And sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative. Generational differences is extremely near and dear to my heart because it's a separation of the church. But the bottom line is this: young people can be a little crazy. And that's the truth. And I can say that because I actually found out I'm a millennial, which is weird. And one of the worst things for some people in the older generation is a millennial with a microphone. So this should be interesting for you. Straight up. So there's a lot of differences of opinion, no matter how old you are, is that life is much more different than it used to be. And it's easy to wonder how to handle that. Students today literally live in a different world than you did. Humans in general. For example, my daughter, our children, our young children are exposed to so much more than we were. Even myself, YouTube, I hate it. We're just exposed to so much. And from the youngest of our Compass kids to the seniors that just graduated last year, shout out Katie Cosper, love you. Our one and only first senior, she's amazing. She's fantastic. The world we live in is fast and can be wonderful, but food for thought. When someone is afraid of understanding or they don't know something, when that person gets knowledge and perspective of a situation, is it still scary? If you got some knowledge about this world and some perspective about this world, would this world still be scary to you? But think about this. Today, you can actually get in an unmarked car with a complete stranger and take a ride. It's called Uber. Think about it. Back in the day, my parents would have killed me for that. You too. But the world is changing and it's just different, and we're all affected. So according to Microsoft research, human beings now lose interest in a subject or matter after 8 seconds. Some of y'all are already gone right now, which is fine. That's cool. But the fact is, our attention span has now been surpassed by a goldfish. Something that you win at a carnival, something that you get at Petco. I don't go to Petco. Black people don't shop at Petco because we don't buy fish. We cook it, we fry it, and we eat it. But not goldfish, catfish. You know what a fish fry is. Stop acting crazy. But Deuteronomy 6:6 says, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. And you shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk to them when you sit in your home, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down and rise." So to break it down for those that may not understand, you should be literally talking about Jesus to your children all day, every day, for them to understand that. But the world says different about generational community. Generational differences is what's normative, how you get around, how you communicate, what you value. And it seems to create two responses that arise in question. The older generation says, what's wrong with this generation? Because it's just different from when you grew up and what you did. And then this new generation comes along and says, you know what, why don't they understand us? They don't get it. I don't understand why they just can't take the time to get it. And it's extremely easy. Get understanding. And no one is taking the time from both generations to bridge the gap. We're not doing what Jesus did, y'all. Did God stay in one place and allow people to come to him? No. Jesus went to the masses. He went to the people. Everybody say unity. Unity. That was trash. Come on, say unity. Unity. That's right. No one is taking the time to bridge the gap and create unity, comprehension, acceptance. And if we continue to do that, we're all going to stay segregated. And I use that word intentionally. We could learn so much if we decide to get out of our own lane. Now, stay in your lane for some things. But for the younger generation who literally needs your insight and your perspective and your knowledge, our students need y'all. I mean, heck, I need y'all. Literally bridging the gap. When one person from the older generation decides to pass down some knowledge and insight of the Lord's glorious deeds to someone that is younger than them, that could have a ripple effect that can change the community. And how do we expect these students literally to grow if y'all aren't passing down any of the knowledge? The Barna Research Group is a fantastic and trusted resource that devotes their time to collecting data and identifiable behaviors and characteristics for generations. To simply put it, this group engages the heartbeat of a generation. And they just came out with a fantastic book titled Gen Z, the Culture, Beliefs and Motivations in Shaping a New Generation. And this book is about Gen Z. And that's anybody born in the year 1999 to 2015. And that's the ages of 3 to 19 years old. So I'm pretty sure all of your students, Encompass kids and Encompass students, fall within this age range. And I'm not an expert. And I don't have a sociology degree, psychology degree, but not sociology. And I am just a student pastor, which is extremely dope. It's awesome. I'm not an expert. But the reason we're going to look at this today isn't to come to any particular conclusion or claims or to put any generation into a box. But for me, after looking at our current landscape, we need to ask ourselves a very important question about our faith culture. And that question literally keeps me coming to work day after day after day. And looking at this church here and churches in America today, are we taking the time out to serve and grow the next generation? Is it possible that many churches, including Compass, are trying to raise and create and prepare these young Christians for a world that doesn't exist? Are we making disciples of Jerusalem when we should be making disciples of Babylon? And I use that intentionally. Just let me break down the differences between Jerusalem and Babylon really quick. Jerusalem, and I love Texas, born and raised here. It's like a small country town. It's mono-religious. It's very slow, not as diverse. A lot of Sunday night dinners happen there. And then you have Babylon. That's like moving to New York City. Babylon is advanced. It is faith at the margins, whatever you want to believe. Very diverse. The opposite of what Jerusalem is. But there's one thing that hasn't changed, and that is God. But if we take a lesson from our friends who were in the same boat 2,600 years ago, course corrections were made. And that's one thing to say and another to do. Are we preparing people for a faith culture that doesn't exist? So for every person in this room, no matter how old you are, just because it's different, because this world is not what you grew up in, that doesn't mean it's bad. That means we need to seek understanding. Literally. It doesn't mean it's a bad world. But let's just get that established right now. For those of you in the older generation, it just means it's different. My question to you parents is that, are you parenting for a world that doesn't exist? Our volunteers that we have here that we're so blessed to have, are you serving for a world that doesn't exist? And students, I didn't forget y'all, do you feel like the church is hitting the mark? Students, are you leading in a way that makes the church extremely attractive to your peers? Are we making this place a place for everyone? Are we leading in a way that fosters the opportunities for God-given talents and passions to grow in an effort to change the world? And how do we even do that? Are we preparing you for Jerusalem when we should be preparing you for Babylon? And the reason I was absolutely scared to death when Pastor Nate came and told me to do this message, yes, I was told to preach this message, has nothing to do with how I would look to you, what I would say, would I mumble or stumble over my words, would I pronounce some things incorrectly, already happened, or the number of people watching, thank you Tracy, shout out, Facebook Live, but had everything to do with the intense magnitude of a task that is at hand right now. Are we instilling true faith in God and the next generation, and are we bridging the generational gap here at Compass? Because I love every church, I do, but I love y'all so much more. I'm very biased. Here in our North Fort Worth community, are we reaching out to the next generation? And are y'all reaching out to the older generation? Because we need one another. We do. We need authentic faith. Faith that stands the test of time. Now, if you have your Bibles or a smartphone and a Bible app, please turn to Psalm 78:4. And it says, "We will not hide from their children, but tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders that he has done." We believe in one thing, and one thing that translates. So let's go on a journey to find out what stands the test of time. Before the Babylons were ever captured by Israel, there was a prophet and poet by the name of Asaph. And Asaph was a skilled poet who writes beautifully about how faith works, how faith in its purest form can't help but be passed down from generation to generation. Now let's dive deeper back into Psalm 78. We're going to read 4-7 again. We will not hide from their children. We will not hide. But tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders that he has done. We are going to be experts in everything that God has done, how far he's brought us, how faithful he has been. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach to their children. Verse 6, that the next generation might know them. And here's my favorite part. The children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but to keep his commandments. These 7 verses right here are the reason why some of you are sitting here today. Because at one time or another, you were yet a child unborn. And there was someone in your life who didn't care about social status, who didn't care if your family grew up in the church, who didn't care about the stats about church or life or anything like that. And they decided to instill that faith in someone else, that authentic God-given faith, and that was you. You were the ones that benefited. For me, it was my parents. My parents were fantastic. I don't deserve them. Every time I acted ungodly, they would literally try to model or demonstrate the wonder, the glorious deeds of God. They would do everything they can sometimes. And I say sometimes because as a parent, you love God, we love God, but sometimes it's like, boy, if you don't get out of my face. And I got a 6-year-old daughter who I went at it with last night. I'll punch you back in the womb, girl. Think I'm playing games with you? I'm getting too hot right now, I'm sorry. But really, all jokes aside, that faith-based, authentic, real God love was instilled from my godfather. And yes, my parents, my dad was a pastor, it was all good. I love my parents, but literally, my godfather, Thomas, who was 40 years old, literally took me to youth group, brought my friends lunch and dinner, and we would all fellowship in the Lord. That is that true faith, that realness that I'm talking about. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Rest in peace, Thomas. But he always seemed to leave the best way to demonstrate your faith to me. And that was not by words, but by actions. Faith without works is dead. Everybody knows that verse. And it's the truth. Because you are a living window into the truth of God. And my question to y'all, congregation, right now is, what is your window showing? When people look into your life and see how you act, are you modeling the true, authentic faith of God, or are you halfway doing it? Or are you on Sunday claiming to have that faith, but living like the world on Monday? A life that reflects the wonders of God has the potential to unleash a generational chain reaction that can change the course of history. Those people that went against the grain stepped up to the call of God. Mother Teresa, she didn't care who it was, how old, how young you were, she helped out everybody. The Lord Jesus Christ healed whomever, whenever, wherever. Some of you are listening to this and thinking, I would like to live out verse 5 and teach my son or daughter or whomever, but they don't want to listen. And my dad tells a story about a friend that I had. His name was Chris Savage, and that's his real name. Savage is so popular right now. I don't know why. But that's his actual name. And he was actually being a terror to his parents. He was being a savage. This dude was mean. He would skip school. I'm talking like I'm in middle school, him doing this. Like, this is ridiculous. So one day his parents called my parents and were like, hey, how's LaMarcus? And my dad was like, he's beautiful. He's amazing. So they took Chris Savage to a doctor's office, and they sat on his mom. Her name was Mary Jane. I love it. And she sat him on this table, and my dad was telling me the story, and she kneeled down and just in utter despair. And she was like, honey, what is wrong? What is wrong? And so they brought in the doctor. He started poking, conducting tests, and said, hey, and this is one of the things I hate about doctor's office, I'll talk to you next week. Like, you want to know what's wrong now, right? And so a week later, she gets a call from the doctor. And more importantly, she just wants to know what's wrong with my little baby. And he said, I have good news and bad news. The good news is your child is healthy. There's nothing wrong with him. And the bad news is your child is healthy. There's nothing wrong with him. But I'm sure he'll make for a wonderful adult. And at that moment, it was like something slapped her in the face, because she realized her son was healthy, but her son was flipping crazy. And that happens to all of us. It's actually biological. It's called pruning. And I found this out, which is crazy. Around our middle school years, from I guess 6 to, I don't know, in the north, they might go to like 9th grade, I don't know. But from in those years, 1/3 of your cerebral cortex actually starts to disappear, which is kind of crazy. So to the parents of a 6th grader in the room who sits at bed at night, or they lie awake and they wonder, does their child even listen? Do they even care? Do they even understand? I mean, the fact is your kid's literally losing his mind. It's not a joke, but it is. Because the fact of the matter is, this happened to you too. So you've already lost your mind. But that's between you and God. I ain't got nothing to do with that. But in all seriousness, when God established a nation, and remember we talked about this in Psalm 78, this was part of the plan. This was how the people of God would continue to be the people of God. Because the older generation, by the way, I'm not pointing to this side. The older generation would literally tell the younger generation about the good deeds and the gloriousness of God. I don't know if that's a word, but whatever. But they wouldn't just tell them, they would model it. They would live by it. And literally, the wonder of his ways, he had the opportunity continually over and over to prove himself faithful. The Lord did. Literally faithful. When has God not been faithful? Like, think about this. Just a little rant that I'm going to go on. Faithfulness. If you have a spouse or a mother or a sibling going through something so terminally ill, like leukemia or cancer or something like that, and your child is in the room seeing you get mad at God, what is that going to show? That God is not graceful? Because here's the thing, healing from God does not look like healing from us. Authentic faith, to understand whatever God's plan is for my life, I'm going to pass that down to the next generation by how I interact with God. They would model this. And what would happen is, and what would take place is, a deposit of faith into the next generation to witness the whole cycle. It's a cycle, instilling true faith in the next generation by what you do. As a parent, volunteer, teacher, it doesn't matter. The mailman, who cares? But even then, there is a breakdown. And the nation of Israel eventually found themselves in the hands of Babylon, a foreign place far from the God they once knew. And we find ourselves there right now, a digital Babylon, in a world where information is our primary language, where faith is foreign, and we're in the middle of a struggle. There are more differences in generational opinion. Some of you are parents. You know, I have students that are dealing with suicide, bullying, depression. And it's like this world won't give up. But sometimes your students just need to see the strength in you, to see that authentic, God-given faith through you. Because the fact of the matter is sometimes, and I love y'all, I really do, but I'm gonna bomb y'all right now. They need to be told what to do. And I'm not talking about like a faith-based answer. Oh man, just give it to God and all will work out. To me, that's a cop-out. And I wanted to say right now to all my students right here that I love y'all, and if I ever said that to y'all, I have done y'all a grave disservice. 110%. God, yes, always comes through, but that is in his way. And then there's the concept of what truth is. Truth means in the accordance of fact or reality. And here's the thing. What is true to you is not true to me. What's true to Pastor Nate is not true to me. He's a Browns fan and they're trash. This is probably the last time I'm preaching here because he's gonna fire me, but it's okay. But what's true for your mama ain't true for me. What's true for your daddy ain't true for me. And there's no algorithm to truth, it's a process. There is no set of rules that we need to follow for truth. But can anyone be sure enough to claim to know what it is? And this saddens me as I read this to you. A student, Barna, the Barna Research Group that we talked about, interviewed said, there is no such thing as truth, but there are facts. People can believe whatever truth they want, and there is always room for truth to change. Now, ain't that a shame? And I remember conversations with my parents, and I just wasn't sure. I was a pastor's kid, like I said. I was brought up in the church, and I was brought up in truth. But what is truth? We live in a different world, a digital Babylon, like I keep saying, with faith at the margins. Life has accelerated, and there's nothing new because everything's online. You can do everything that you want from a computer. Apparently, you have a girlfriend from the same thing, but this is weird. Never happened to me. Catfish. I digress. But for the remainder of our time, I want to go back to a conversation. A conversation that sounds like it was scripted by a New York Times best-selling author. A conversation that took place privately and then in a heated courtroom where manipulation was central, both in words that they spoke and the judicial law that they bent. And a conversation that took place just hours before the most important moment in human history, where the worst thing imaginable happened to the best person ever created. A conversation between Pilate and Jesus Christ. Complexity made simple. You just have to know the truth. And the only way to get back to this form is what Pilate didn't know, is that times can seem so unbelievably complex. What Pilate didn't know is often times what keeps us up at night. What Pilate didn't know is sometimes why we question the Lord. What Pilate didn't know is why we look at our life origin, our life purpose. What Pilate didn't know is when we feel lost. What Pilate didn't know is the solution to a generation with depression on the rise. What Pilate didn't know solidifies appropriate self-image. What Pilate didn't know cures the lonely heart. What Pilate didn't know can bring peace to families in contempt And what Pilate didn't know was that the truth was a few feet in front of him. And it doesn't end there. You see, truth, once thought dead, regained a heartbeat. Truth as promised showed its face again. And that is through Jesus Christ. Truth tells depression, I have joy. Truth tells poor image that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Truth tells suicide that the only necessary death has already taken place and it is not yours. It has already been taken, and truth is in Jesus Christ. Literally, he went to measures that no one could and did what no one would do to instill that Jesus Christ is truth. Truth has a name, and that is why we are all here. It is Jesus. And this is how we ensure that we are not preparing our amazing students and your siblings, your young siblings, and your children for Jerusalem, but for Babylon. And there is one being that transcends culture year after year after year. And that is Jesus Christ. And a friend of mine has a pretty good gauge on it of what it looks like to start the journey of truth. And that is my boy, my dude, Pastor Nate Grellen. Because his vision is he wants this church to be a place where there is no generational gap, where there is unity. He wants this to be a place where no matter how old you are or how young you are accepted with your baggage. Because I can tell you this, there is not one person in this room that doesn't carry some type of suitcase, no matter how big and small it is. But the fact is, there is a big divide between the young and not so young. It is a huge gulf. And it's not simply years. It's not that we don't agree. It's not that we don't approve. It's not that we just don't understand or live so far away. And this stupid gap in the church is tearing us apart. It's creating a rift. It's about unity in God and the authentic faith that is Jesus Christ. There is so much lost between us. Pick up your Bibles again and let's read Corinthians 3:13 through 14. And it says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgives you. 14. And over all of these virtues, put on love, which binds us all together in a perfect what? Unity. Psalms 133:1. It says, how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in what? Unity. Unity and connection will bridge the gap of spreading the message from generation to generation. And the whole goal is to have a community in unity with God. If we overlook and act as if we do not care, I believe that Compass Christian Church in North Fort Worth will fall. But if we man and woman up and decide to get outside of ourselves to instill the true principles of authentic faith in the next generation, I believe what we are doing here at Compass Christian Church North Fort Worth will change communities. And not just that, it will shake this nation. Because it's not about age. We're all here for a common goal. God, I'm spitting everywhere. But the fact is, our common goal is here for Jesus Christ. We're here for Jesus Christ. And I urge you to consider getting to know our students. Come serve on a Wednesday night. Or just show up. Show them that you care. Because whether or not you want to believe it, they are looking at you. Sometimes the stuff you wear. It's kind of old, but it's okay. But the fact is they are looking at you. We may never find the root of their struggles, but we can still plant that seed of love. And we can do that by asking and listening and sharing our own stories. And in this way, we can build that bridge of love, authentic faith, and understanding. And before I pray, I want to forget the urge. I want to challenge you to literally just go meet a student. If it's not here, in your family, a nephew, a niece, somebody. Because you are what they're going to model life after. What you do is what's going to continue the cycle of Jesus Christ. Because if you stop letting that authentic faith go into the next generation, unfortunately, Christianity is dead. It's dead. So it's up to you to literally bridge that gap between our righteous students over here. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for this blessing of today. I thank you for this congregation. I thank you for everyone here. I thank you for our amazing students, Compass Kids. I thank you for all that everyone has done here to take part in the student takeover, and we took over. But more importantly, God, I pray that this gap will be bridged, that we shake and change this community and mold this generation after your own heart with a Christ-centered, authentic faith church. We thank you for this, Lord. By your grace, we are honored to be here, and thank you for our help.